Well, it's great to be here amongst so many friends. And so it's interesting when Donald was speaking about being faint. I was just sharing earlier on, I had a really, in the middle of a bad bout of something called labyrinthitis, which is an inflammation of the inner ear. And actually you feel a bit lightheaded and quite faint. But I have promised Donald that I won't faint while I'm doing this. So, but yes, fallible yet fruitful. So, fallible. This is out of 2 Corinthians. I always like to start with a bit of scripture. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Do you come in? All right. Sorry. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." That's 2 Corinthians 12:9. Probably not the most common way of beginning a CV to reveal all your weaknesses. But as I become older, I'm much more conscious of my weaknesses. As Genesis 3:19 reminds us, as Donald, I suppose, was reflecting in Isaiah 40, we're reminded of our weakness. "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." And indeed, I don't know about anybody who has been to an Ash Wednesday service, but we got thoroughly ashed quite recently. I don't know, perhaps a little bit longer to get rid of it, or whatever. But then we contrast that weakness with how Genesis reminds us of God's greatness. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And then God creates mankind in his own image, blesses them and encourages them to be fruitful. A fruitfulness that remains if we abide in him, with that rather stark reminder that apart from Jesus, we can do nothing. John 15:5, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." And then, not only fruitful, but fruitful even into old age. So both being young and old. It says, "The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord. They will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age." Which is a great encouragement, I think, to many of us here. They will stay fresh and green. Now, if I turn green, you need to walk. So, I grew up as a Christian. I came to deeper faith in 1985. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a bit of the story. I always like an opportunity for people to ask questions. So for some of the things, I'm just going to lead a one-liner, and then you can ask me questions. I'm probably going to speak for about 15 minutes, and I have plenty of time to fill up with some other stories. And so I came to deeper faith in 1985, and I'm going to refer to that as bedding, board, and belonging. And if you want to know any more, please ask at the end. Yet it was really 2005 which was to prove a pivotal moment in our lives. I'm married to someone called Francis. We have 4 sons, more of that a bit later. It is life from that vantage point I want to focus on. John 16:33 tells us that in this world you will face many troubles. But take heart, I, Jesus, have overcome the world. Now, 2005 was a time when we could see the truth of this. Roll back 10 years before, and we'd have spoken at length about our troubles, but we only had a faint glimpse that we would see a way through. In the early 1990s, and I appreciate probably all of us have been through tough times, every area of life was difficult. We had 3 parents terminally ill. Our twins had been diagnosed with epilepsy. Frances, my wife, wasn't well. The work context I was in was almost toxic. And actually church life was very draining. More of this in due course. But we go back again to early 25. It was someone called Carl Martin, you may have heard of him, lives up in Scotland, has written a few books. He heard about how God had sort of transformed some of these troubles. And he thought, maybe you've got something to help others. And so starting with family, and moving on to work and rest, and then finally finishing with church, we'll see how God bore fruit, even in our frailty and fallibility. Earlier in my life, I would have placed this family work church in a slightly different order. When I first became a Christian, I suppose I would have started church first, then work, then family. They'll understand, won't they? But I've come to learn that we're only able to do what we do out of our relationship with God first, but then with our families and those around us. That God places a greater priority on where He has called us to work, and it's in our family life and our work life we are church. So I'll begin with family. It was March 2005, just before going to Israel. We went to Holy Trinity Brompton, what I like to refer to almost like Mother Church. Anyway, to hear about family life ministry, because Carl had said, well, there's an area you could have a look at. And it was an initial focus on marriage, drawing on Christ's teaching. A couple you may have heard of called Nikki and Sila, have developed 2 courses, one for married couples and another for those preparing for marriage. As the day unfolded, this is part of the fallibility and weakness, it became clear that we were not great at any of the areas that the course covered. Maybe you're not still, but I don't know. We're still working at it. We didn't listen attentively. We didn't appreciate our differences. We were not good at resolving conflict. Anyway, the list could go on. We don't, and still don't, wear this as a badge. That's very clever. But recognise our reliance on Jesus to be all that He wants us to be in every relationship. Our visit to Israel gave us time to pray. We returned thinking, oh, we'll give it a go. So we started to run the course in our home in Edinburgh. Our engagement with this ministry grew after we moved to York, as we became involved in an organisation called Family Matters, where we couples expanded to include parenting and offering support to families going through tough times. As we discover throughout the Bible, there's no such thing as the perfect couple, nor the perfect parent. Only the Holy Spirit producing fruit in our lives as He moulds our character to be more loving, to be more full of joy, more peaceful, more patient, gentler, kinder, with more of His goodness, faithfulness and self-control in our lives. It's a great joy to continue to invest in people's lives, particularly as couples prepare for marriage. Learning about our alliance, we heard earlier about strength, the strength that flows from our relationship with God and each other in all we do. We're blessed with a great family, 4 sons, all now married, with 7 grandchildren, and miraculously another on the way. 2 of them live abroad. And as we chose to volunteer more, we suddenly had less income. God has been so faithful in finding ways of letting us see them. One that springs to mind is Brisbane, but not Bangkok. but please ask again. But more about that a little later on. All these things begin with B's, so just to give you a hint. So work, and I've added rest to that. Something I've learned in later life is the joy and gift of rest. Now, the average person apparently spends 90,000 hours at work. It's a lot, isn't it? And I suppose that's, for us as men, one of our most significant callings. It's about a third of our lifetime. I had the privilege of working with some great organisations, both in the private and public sector, so Cadbury Schweppes, Cubers and Lybrand Associates, and a range of government departments, councils and health bodies. Now, there's plenty of evidence that healthy organisations are more productive, more fruitful than those that aren't. Despite this evidence, organisations can almost change overnight. And I've worked with a few. A change at the top or a change in political control. Each of us, I guess all of us, have probably faced working with organisations that perhaps aren't what we quite like them to be, where the atmosphere is a little troubled, where people ignore evidence. Reflecting on these times, a reminder about part of a couple of verses from 2 Corinthians 1, 3-4. The God of comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. That sense that God equips us to come alongside those going through a tough time and help them through it. As I look back, as I put actually in the introduction, as I look back, I've come to realise it was God who was the real troubleshooter. And we saw God work in amazing ways. In one organisation, it was he who resolved a problem that was bigger than their annual budget. The West's work, though, often involved rolling up my sleeves at least 5 days a week. Yet in 2005, this pattern changed. While at the course with HTB, Francis and I learned that we'd been successful in obtaining some project work with the Department of Health. This was amazingly encouraging work, and it's even got a football story. See, it's very important. What I could call Ball and Beckham. Again, if you want to know more about that, ask at the end.
Bees again.
So again with bees, you're getting it. So I'm glad you're getting this. Okay. But this change in the pattern of work opened the door to doing less paid work to volunteer more. At that time, I went to an event where I met Mark Green. He'd written a book called Thank God It's Monday. People familiar with that? Yeah, it's good. For me, it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone speaking so clearly that God was interested in our work, that work was his design, that there was no hierarchy in our work, that where God has called us is equally important to him. Whether we're a missionary in Mongolia, a till operator in Tesco's, or a warehouseman in Waitrose, you'll see I quite like alliteration. And there was a video course that went with the book. Now, as a leadership team, I was part of the leadership now at Morningside Baptist Church, we sensed it would be a good course for the whole church to do, for all our small groups to do. So we offered the course to all the groups, and the 35 of the 37 did so. Many people were blessed through the course, not least those who thought that the church was only interested in their paycheck. It's quite sad, isn't it? There's now a much better understanding in the church of the place of work, of our call to pray for and be a blessing to the places God has called us to. There's an organisation called the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, which maybe some of you have heard of, and they've created a lot of resources to help with this. One of these is a DVD course, which is really an update on Thank God It's Monday. It's called Fruitfulness on the Front Line. And it was a privilege to introduce this course to a men's gathering a bit like us today, and this in York. Now, Fruitfulness on the Front Line honours those also in unpaid roles, if they're caring or volunteering in some way, revealing opportunities for fruit to flow from all those we come alongside. whether at home, whether at work, or where we socialise. Much highlighted in the excellent course called Talking Jesus. And again, if you want to know more about that, please ask at the end, although it doesn't begin with B's. So, moving on. Let's talk about rest. Now, when I grew up, and actually for quite a long time, I don't remember anyone in the church talking about the importance of rest. And yet, there's some lovely verses. This is out of the Message version of Matthew 11. Are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. We certainly knew the truth of this in our own lives, yet we hadn't heard how the Message version of Matthew 11 continues. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me. Something I often need to do is just slow down a bit. I often overcommit myself. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. What a great promise, but also what a great gift rest is. Just as we serve out of our relationship with God and each other, so we should work from a position of rest. As you'll have seen earlier, I love alliteration. And drawing on something that Rick Warren once said, Francis and I try to maintain a pattern of rest each day, each week, each month, each year. We call those daily diversions, weekly withdrawals, monthly meanderings. You're getting this out. I bet you wondered, what's the annual going to be? Annual abandonment. It's good. It's good. And it's great, isn't it, actually, to just carve out a bit of time to spend with those you love and with God. And to be able to put a line. I love putting lines to the calendar. And we can sometimes step away from that. So finally, church. In addition to support to families and those in work, 2005 also saw a change in our involvement with the church, becoming more engaged as part of the church leadership team. We had aways days as a team, and it was one of these. We talked and prayed about 24/7 prayer. Was it about 24/7 prayer? A couple of us had just read Red Moon Rising. This was the book that Pete Gregg and others wrote about the story of the emergence of 24/7 prayer. There was a sense that we should pray as a whole church in this way, but the key question was for how long? As we prayed and reflected, every verse that came to mind, every verse that we drew on, was for 40 days and 40 nights. We were complete novices, yet sensed that this was what God was calling us to do, and this was back in 2005. No advanced tech in those days, it was all manual, so we brought in this handwritten roll, and it had days across the top, times down the side. We brought it into a service, and the hourly prayer slots just filled up. Not just the easy ones, but those in the middle of the night. As the Lord led us in our prayers, we began to see amazing answers. We were growing as a church and had outgrown our current venue. We'd made an approach to another church who had a vacant building in an area in Edinburgh called the Braid, which could seat 3 times the numbers we could currently accommodate. Within 10 days of our praying, a very firm no had been transformed into an enthusiastic yes. Not only could we have the building, but they would decorate it and kit it out so we had space for our expanding children's and youth work. We saw many further answers to prayer over those 40 days and nights. Perhaps the greatest fruit was undoubtedly how time spent with Jesus in the prayer room transformed everyone's prayer life. Not least the well over 100 people. We had a little booklet and they just wrote down, I've never prayed like this before. Amazing. Oswald Chambers reminds us that prayer does not fit us for the greater work. Prayer is the greater work. It is often the fruit of other people's prayers, enduring prayers, that we're blessed with. As we read in Colossians 1, we have not stopped praying for you. It's very clever. We continue to ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will, to all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work. It was wonderful seeing someone called Ian Longfield. I don't know whether anybody here knows Ian or knew him. He's died now, but at the launch of St. Thomas, he was in tears as he saw the fruit of well over 50 years of prayer. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And one of the greatest blessings is that we can, if you like, see the fruit of those who pray over a long time for us. And I guess I've come to this point where every blessing we've seen has its root in persevering prayer. We've seen this in many small stories. At Morningside Baptist story, another B, if you remember this, a story of big issue and birthdays. Again, you can ask me about that later. And then something a bit larger. St. Thomas, and this was in York, a black bin bag. So, again, please ask if you want to know more. And although we saw fruit in the years before 2005, we've seen much more fruit since. Not only what has already been mentioned, but we participated in the East African Alpha Conference. We went to Burundi twice, participated in 3 years of student mission called Summer Soul. We've done missions from Edinburgh to Coventry, and a number of places in between, including Middlesbrough and Newcastle. Engaged in church planting in York and in Newcastle, and so much more. The thing that really thrills me is to see so many people across the generations bearing fruit. However young they are, however old they are, it's been great to see that. And that fruit has come because they have their confidence in Jesus. Jeremiah 17 says, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They'll be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It doesn't fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green." One of the greatest things, I haven't gone green yet, so that's good. And always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. Psalm 147 reminds us that God delights in us as we put our hope in his unfailing love. That even though we may fail, he is always faithful. Even though we are fallible, we can still bear fruit as we put our trust in him. Fallible, yet fruitful. Well, that's the sort of first, it's probably longer than 15 minutes, but never mind. But please do ask questions. I'll remind you of these beads. Okay, the first one was, well, not necessarily the first one. The first one was bedding, board and belonging. Okay, you can ask me that. Maybe you might want to think about that, because I think I've got five B's, and if I'm looking right, there are 5 tables. Black bin bag, big issue and birthdays, Ball and Beckham, if you want a football story, and then finally Brisbane, but not Bangkok. So there we go. The floor is yours, and ask away. Okay?
Yeah, I'd like to know a bit more about how you came to faith.
All right. So this is about
in 2005.
Okay. So this is bedding, board, and belonging. So the bedding refers to new neighbours, providing us with everything we needed to enable our 4 young boys, who then were 5 to 11, to get to sleep. Our removals lorry, due in the morning, hadn't arrived by late evening. Board refers to being offered a meal by that same group of neighbours, as we had no means of cooking. And then belonging was discovering that 6 of those 7 neighbours were Christians. And we went along to one of the churches some of them went to. And when we arrived, we just felt we'd come home.
Yeah.
Although I grew up in faith, I just carry on with this. I grew up in an area before, I'm trying to think, the second something, Vatican Council, that was it. This was a time when, this was in 1960, and for some unknown reason, Catholics couldn't go into Anglican churches and Anglicans couldn't go into Catholic churches. Isn't it great that there is amongst us everyone from every different denomination? And it was an Ash Wednesday service, and we'd been told, I grew up as a Catholic because my grandmother was Italian, my mother grew up in Egypt, and so I was told, you can't go to this service, but it was about in 1960. And of course it was very obvious that I hadn't been, as I had there were about 8 of us, I think, in the school. And we were about to be caned, because that was corporal punishment. And then suddenly this mother appeared of one of the children. She wasn't floating out in the sky. But she suddenly appeared, and she went in to see the head and explained. And I'd been sort of mumbling away as a 6 or 7 year old saying, this isn't fair. And I think that was a real sense of God, I think, at that time, having that sort of relationship. And we'd been to church, but it was only when we arrived, I think, it was a small Church of Scotland church in the middle of nowhere almost, that had roots with John Wimber, had roots with David Watson, that relationship consolidated, that I realised I could have a living relationship with Jesus. So I hope that answers that question. So,
At the age of 6 was that?
Sorry?
At the age of 6 you realised that?
No. I think the thing is that, I don't know, it's a journey, isn't it, really? I think I had that sort of faith in relationship, but it only consolidated, I think, as an adult when I discovered this church where I felt I've come home. I'd been to church, but it wasn't a living relationship. I was coming along, I was listening, and I might have taken on board some of the stuff, but Jesus wasn't, if you like, ultimately in my heart. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Better have the football one, Phil.
Oh yeah, let's have the football one. So this is Hall and Beckham. Thanks, Don. So this relates to when we got into something called personal budgets. So this is people designing the care that best suits them. We're all very different, and we often tend to have a menu of stuff rather than actually finding that if you design something more specific, it's not only better value, but also better for the people concerned. So the hall does refer to football, and in this case, Rochdale Football Club, which in 2005 I checked, they were in the 2nd division, which was the old 4th. They're now actually, I think, sitting 2nd in the National. And in this case, it involves the Rochdale Football Club and an avid fan who had a muscle wasting disease, and she was wheeled to the games by his wife. Now, Beckham refers to his wife mistakenly believing that Beckham had hit the net when her husband asked who had scored. And you don't need to go in the history books to find out that Beckham never played for Rochdale Football Club. Now, he needed to ask because sometimes with these illnesses you lose other faculties. And he'd lost the ability to see well and hear well. So he was constantly asking what's going on, whatever. And at this point, they suddenly realised, this isn't working, is it? So, because of personal budgets, they had some money which they could use how they wanted for respite care. His wife was his main carer, and so she provided all the care. And respite gave her a break. So they thought, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll use some of the respite money to pay for a season ticket. Now I have to say, the season ticket for Rochdale is not the same as a season ticket for somewhere else. So anyway, the breakthrough came when they said they'd pay for a season ticket if another fan would come and sit with her husband during the match, so he had someone who knew what the game was and who was playing. This worked so well that the fan decided, you don't need to pay me the next year. I'm thrilled to be able to come and be with you. And so that carried on. A great friendship developed, and the fan really enjoyed spending time with her husband. And so just an example amongst many of a better outcome, a break for his wife, but obviously someone who actually knew that Beckham did not play for Roger. So thank you. So what we've got now, we've got big issue and birthdays, black bin bag, Brisbane but not Bangkok. Okay, John.
Brisbane and Bangkok, having been to both.
Oh, right.
I'm just sort of wondering, they are different.
They are. They are very different. And there was an extra B in this, because it was Brisbane but not Bangkok. Now, Brisbane is where our eldest son Anthony's family live. And we were longing to see them after they first moved there. Now, when we shifted from working full-time to working part-time, money was a bit tight. And so we just prayed that the funds would come so we could go and see them. Have you heard about this when you pray about something and nothing happened? Okay. So we're praying away, nothing happened. But then we discovered that Anthony's wife, she's Malaysian, Chinese lady, called Vulang, was pregnant. And so yes, we thought, yeah, we'll go the next year. And we carried on praying, and still nothing happened. And I must admit, I went through this bit, I don't know if you've done this, where you're praying. I'm praying and saying, God, don't you realise that the prices are going up? I kept praying, the prices are still going up. Yeah. Anyway, as we mentioned, we've got two of our sons live abroad. And we have another son, David, who lives in Thailand. And we had planned to go to Brisbane via Bangkok. But David explained that when we were planning to be there, he and his wife would be in Singapore. They work in the university sector, and they were going to be there for 3 or 4 weeks. As soon as we knew that, we suddenly had a gift which enabled us to book the flights. And Jesus whispering, have you ever had this? Quietly in the ear, you see, you needed to wait. If you booked the flights early, you'd have been in the wrong place. So there we go. Brisbane, but not. So we've got two last now. Big issue and birthdays, black bin bag. Bin bag, okay. This is quite an amazing story, really. One of my favourite prayers is, the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few, please ask for more workers in the harvest field. And I pray that everywhere. A lot of people have prayed that about. We've seen a lot of answers to prayer in that. Now the black bin bag was one of those answers to prayer. Someone we knew got up early one morning to discover a black bin bag at the side of their house. He was in a hurry and went off to an early appointment. Later in the morning, his wife rang him and asked him to look inside the black bin bag. He hadn't, but she had. It was full of old bread bags. But instead of bread you could spread, it was full of bread you could spend. We've been praying at this church, St Thomas in York. We come alongside them. They'd been on the verge of closure, but a retired couple had seen the church grow from 10 to 40. But they were now looking to retire from that ministry, and the church didn't have enough money for a paid post. But guess how much was in the black bin bag? Any guesses? Any idea? Okay.
Enough.
That's a good answer, man. That's a good answer. Yeah. So actually there was 115,000. It was in the media actually. I can remember someone.
Was it all in £1 coins?
I don't know what it was. I think it was in notes. And I can remember there was someone we knew on the York press, and he was the head of news. He was a Christian, but he kept mithering me, because you have to put the money on deposit, and then people can then come on and say, oh yeah, I had all my savings in my black bin bag, and I accidentally left it at this house. And you have to put it on deposit for 6 months. And it wasn't quite, the 6 months wasn't quite up. And so, but he kept mithering me, and so like, we must tell people about this story, it's just amazing, isn't it? And I said, well, come the new year, you can. But he couldn't resist. So, Christmas time, people looking for good news stories. And I suddenly saw this thing in your paper, and then in the national media, about this amazing. We weren't able to tell them how much it was. But yeah, it was enough to fund a post for 5 years. And interestingly enough, how many people here are from an Anglican tradition? Okay, yeah, a few of you. I've been in quite a variety of churches, so I've been in Catholic, I've been in Baptist, Church of Scotland, and now Anglican. But they have very strange arrangements about their property and who lives in them. And the person who lived in the vicarage for St Thomas was actually at St Michael of Belfry, and he it was who discovered that he was being called to serve at the St Thomas in York. And on the strength of 115,000, the church agreed to fund the post for 5 years. And it's now over 150 strong and still growing. So, black bin bag, a great answer to prayer. Final one is, by elimination, big issue in birthdays.
Is it too late for somebody to stake a claim to it?
Yeah! Go for it, John. That's really good. Really good. I'm conscious of time. But yes.
Drugs money.
Big issue and birthdays. The big issue refers to a homeless guy called Mike. And he asked if he could sell the big issue outside Morningside Baptist Church after we moved to the break. And I said, there's no problem, yeah, please do. Birthdays tells us sometime later, Mike, having found Jesus, was in one of the church facilities learning how to cook. Those involved in running it found out it was his birthday, and so they baked him a cake and presented it to him. And I recall Mike telling me he couldn't ever remember having a birthday cake before, on his birthday. Now, having lived on this street, Mike's health wasn't that great, but he found great fellowship and friendship in the church, a lovely place to live, and told me not long before he died, a couple of years later, that these final years were the best years of his life, and he knew he had an eternal home to go to. So,
Good way to finish.
I'm done.